I had a high school teacher who unknowingly got into a car with John Wayne Gacy. He ditched school and hitchhiked into the city with a friend, and Gacy picked them up. Said he was only wearing boxers and just was super weird. So they jumped out at a random stoplight. Didn't know who he was until they saw his picture sometime later. I'll never know for sure if it was him, but a man who looked very much like Gary Ridgway followed me in his truck as I was walking down Elliott Avenue in Seattle one day in the 90s. He kept harassing me and getting angry that I would not get in. He then pulled into the street in front of me and started yelling. I went inside a business and used their phone to call the cops. He left, but I had his license plate number. The cops were not very helpful. When Ridgway was arrested and I saw his face, I felt like it was probably the same man. This is Dead Air, and true stories from Reddit from people who came far too close to serial killers. Listen with the lights off. My mother met a serial killer when I was around 2 or 3. It was in Vancouver in the early 90s, and she'd listed a rug for sale at the local antique store or in the classifieds. This guy came by the house to take a look, and she answered the door holding me. He took a look but didn't end up buying the rug. A couple of months later, police officers showed up at the door to inquire about the guy who had come by the house to look at the rug. Evidently, he had killed several people, and when he was caught, his notebook had our address and phone number in it. This was likely in the 2-week period he was in Vancouver after murdering 2 people in Ontario. He sexually assaulted 4 people in Vancouver. Apparently he was a bit sketchy looking, but that was pretty common among some of the garage sale type people that would respond to those ads. I checked with my mom, and it was David Alexander Snow. My mom and her cousin met Bundy while on vacation. My mom had had hand surgery recently, and she had it wrapped up as it was sore, and she was still recovering. They were drinking, and he approached, asking for a beer. My mom said she got weird vibes, but her cousin was super into him. He kept making references to struggling with his arm, which was in a sling, and trying to bond with her over their injuries, but he wouldn't get into anything specific about what he'd hurt or how it happened. Just that he was struggling with loading up his stuff. She doesn't remember a lot of the conversation, but he kept moving his arm and fingers like he forgot he was injured. But she thought maybe she was just judging him too harshly. At some point, he asked if they'd help him take his stuff to his car and said he'd definitely repay their kindness, but my mom said she forgot her pain medication at the hotel and they had to go. Her cousin was really upset, but she recognized him immediately on the news when he was arrested. I may have had a scary interaction with Israel Keys. Back in 2007-ish, I was living in Alaska, and I worked at one of those drive-up coffee huts. You typically work alone in these huts. We started getting this one walk-up guy who fits Key's description perfectly. He exhibited some very creepy and strange behaviors that creeped all the employees out, enough so that the owners of the coffee hut started coming and sitting in their vehicle when we closed. Because of this guy, they even attempted to have him trespassed. Eventually he stopped coming around. Maybe a week or so after we stopped seeing him, I'm leaving work, it's dark out, and as I'm waiting for traffic to clear to pull out, here comes comes the guy speed walking down the sidewalk. He comes to my front passenger door and tries to open it. He aggressively tried to open the door for about 5 to 10 seconds before my brain processed what was happening, and I floored it out of there. Never saw him again. 5-ish years later, when he got arrested and I saw his face on the news, I got this icky feeling. He looked just like my coffee shop creep. One of my mates knows a guy, convoluted connection I know, who actually got a lift from him while backpacking around the countryside. Apparently, he got no ill vibes from Ivan initially until he started driving past the agreed drop-off destination and wouldn't explain why he didn't stop. They kept on going a fair distance, but he kicked up enough of a fuss that Ivan eventually stopped and let him out. It gets worse though. Night was starting to fall, and he decided that it was too far to bother walking anywhere before dark, so he ended up throwing down his sleeping bag in a small gully, fairly sheltered from view but still within sight of the road. He'd barely gotten set up for the night when he spotted Ivan's car slowly driving back along the road. The car trolled back and forth several times before eventually giving up and driving off. Needless to say, he didn't stay at his little campsite for much longer. He took off through the scrub and luckily got all the way back into town a few hours later. A few months after that, he saw Ivan on the news and recognized him. Pretty chilling. Someone I know believes she was targeted by the Golden State Killer. She lived in the area where he was active at the time. It started with phone calls to her house at strange hours, but the caller would hang up right away. She thought it was a prank at first, but it continued for longer than any run-of-the-mill high school kid would have the attention span for. It culminated in someone cutting her house's power lines, then shortly thereafter calling just to do some creepy, heavy breathing over the phone. The cops responded but couldn't find who did it. I only know this story because when the Golden State Killer was caught, she said she could finally feel safe being home alone, and explained what had happened in her youth. My dad met the Yorkshire Ripper. My dad worked in a warehouse where he loaded up delivery vans, and the Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, was a delivery driver. Dad doesn't scare easily, but said that the Ripper had the coldest eyes he has ever seen, and that being around him and talking to him was unnerving. He doesn't remember much of their conversations, only that he was always glad to see the back of him when he drove off. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, installed our ADT system when I was little. I remember he kept coming back to work on it. My brother and I would help hand him tools while he worked. My dad always said the guy gave him the creeps when he was there. Edit. By coming back, I mean the system would just go off, and he would have to come back out and try to fix it again. It was apparently a third-party alarm switch that had been installed in a closet or something. I am probably making this part up in my head, but I swear he said he was going to kill the guy that wired it in. My dad used to play tennis with Jeffrey Dahmer's dad when they lived in Ohio. He used to walk down the street to the Dahmer's house, and then he and Mr. Dahmer would ride to the tennis courts together in Mr. Dahmer's car. My dad said Jeffrey, who was only 15 15 or 16 at the time, was the weirdest person he had ever met. He said he would try to talk to him when he went to their house, but Jeffrey would just ignore him or walk away in the middle of a sentence. My dad said he never remembers Jeffrey making eye contact with him, and he almost always smelled like alcohol. My dad even made a comment to his sister once that he thought Jeffrey didn't have a soul and that he might murder someone one day. My dad moved to West Virginia while Jeffrey was still in high school, but my dad said he never forgot about him. When Jeffrey became a national story in the 90s, my dad said he wasn't surprised at all, and even gave a couple interviews to an Ohio news station during the trial. My cousin picked up Aileen Wuornos while she was hitchhiking and gave her a ride. She tried to initiate sex to pay for the ride, but he said no, he was just giving her a ride. He was a school counselor and had mistaken her for someone he knew and was on his way to work. She was quite persistent, but he told her he didn't need to be paid and had to get to work. He dropped her off and went to work. Shortly after, she got caught, and he recognized her and realized how close he came to being another victim. My Boys and Girls Club basketball coach was a serial killer. He was a sweet guy. I really liked him, especially compared to the big and loud and hardcore coach that was always yelling. George seemed sweet and empathic and caring. He also worked at the Nintendo store at the mall, and when my mom and sister and I would go to the mall, they would take me to the Nintendo store and ask for George and just leave me with him while they went and shopped. He would let me play test games and set me up on a console in the store, and I'd be there for hours. Turns out he had lots of family trouble and had issues with women. He would pick them up at bars, take them home, have sex with them, and then stab them. He'd stab them in a really weird way, like he'd stab in a line and keep going even after getting past their body, stabbing the mattress. Then he'd take their bodies back to the bar and pose them after hours near the dumpster. Funny story, he was written up in a true crime novel called The Charmer. One time, when I brought some friends home from college, a friend that was a voracious reader found the book, picked it up and read it cover to cover. I don't think she realized it was true crime. When she finished the book, I went and grabbed the phone book for our city and looked up all the names of the characters in the book for her. Before Paul Bernardo started killing, but after he started raping, he tried to lure my mother into a secluded place. Nothing happened after that, but she says she's pretty sure she saw him and Karla Homolka, his accomplice in the murders, sometime later, like a few years later. Back in the mid-70s, my mom helped run things at her university's Rathskeller. She didn't know, of course, who he was at the time, but a wild-eyed Ted Bundy had come into the bar, even though they were closed for an event they were prepping for, and he sat at the table she was sitting at while she did some paperwork or something. Just sat and stared at her and freaked her the fuck out. She says she could barely speak to this guy because he was giving her such a scary, intense stare. Her boyfriend and future husband / my dad came out from the back, and she suddenly lost the paralysis she was under and bolted for the bar and hid behind it. Dad told the guy to GTFO and that they were closed. Bundy gets up and leaves. It wasn't much later his face was plastered across the headlines, and she recognized him immediately. Scared the crap out of her. He joined a university theatre group that I was part of in the mid-2000s. He showed up to a few meetings, seemed a bit slimy, didn't say too much, very relaxed, didn't make friends with him. He was doing homicide studies. A couple of years later, when he went to court, he stated his name was the Crossbow Cannibal. He'd murdered 3 prostitutes, and yes, shot one of them in the head with a crossbow. I don't know if the cannibal part was true. He's in prison for life. I sat on a very long bus ride next to Richard Ramirez. He stunk and was weird as fuck. I was finally able to move away from him. He stole my AC/DC hat. It was definitely him. He is a very distinct looking person. When I moved, I forgot my hat on the seat and he took it with him. I had no idea who or what he was. My law teacher had this encounter. At the time this happened in the city where I live, Toronto, there were a bunch of missing persons posters going up everywhere downtown. So one day my teacher, I'll call him Mr. M, was out with his wife and daughter. He was somewhere downtown, and in that area there were a bunch of posters of some missing guy. Mr. M saw an older man in the park they were near walking about with a cart of papers. Immediately he thought that the man with the cart was putting up the posters, as that's what they do/did when you needed to put up posters. As Mr. M is watching this man with the cart, he realizes he is not putting up the posters, rather taking them down. So of course, my teacher goes to confront this man. As Mr. M approaches, he calls out something along the lines of, "Hey, you can't be doing that." And without making any eye contact whatsoever, the man with the cart replies in a soft, high-pitched voice, like how psychopaths sound in movies. He goes in this high voice, "Oh no, we won't need these anymore. He's gone. They're not going to find him." So obviously my teacher is a bit freaked out and just walks back to his family. Anyways, 4 months go by and Mr. M has already forgotten about the encounter. One day, however, the man's face is all over the news, so Mr. M turns the volume up, and as it turns out, the guy with the cart was in fact a serial killer. The guy in the poster was one of his victims. Just in case you're curious, NSFW, the killer's name is Bruce MacArthur. He was, and still is I guess, a gay man who used to go around downtown Toronto and lure gay men back to his apartment. There he'd sexually assault them, kill them, and to make it even worse, he'd occasionally eat them. MacArthur was also a gardener at the time, so he'd end up hiding the victims' severed body parts in his clients' backyards. It's fucked up, and he's in prison for the rest of his life. TLDR, one of my teachers met a serial killer in a park who was taking down the missing posters of one of his victims. He only learned he was talking to a killer 4 months following the incident. He's still scarred. My mother worked in a printing and office supply store. One day a man came in to buy some supplies. She doesn't remember what he bought and really didn't remember the encounter. Later on, detectives came into the shop to verify that she had signed a receipt of purchase and it had the store's name on it. It turns out that she had sold supplies to Joel Rifkin, aka Joel the Ripper. He was convicted of killing 9 women, but was believed to have killed 17 altogether. My grandpa lived Chicago around the time John Wayne Gacy was active, killing young boys and men. At the time, my grandpa was a recently married 21-year-old looking for work to support his wife and newborn daughter. One day in late 1971, he was leaving a gas station hoping to find a job in the paper that was sold at the station. As he waited for the bus, a man pulled up beside him and asked if he needed a ride. My grandpa said no. The man then handed him a business card offering a job for $5 an hour, which would have been a ton of money to him. When he got home and showed his wife the business card, she tore it up and told my grandpa she'd kill him if he called that guy back. My grandpa eventually found a job as an auto mechanic. It wasn't until one time when he was having lunch with his boss that they saw the news about Gacy and the bodies found in his house. This story serves as a warning in my family to avoid strangers. I fear what would have happened to my grandpa if he got in that car with John Wayne Gacy. My grandmother remarried after my grandfather passed away. The guy she married had a brother named Robert Charles Brown. Up until I was about 6, we'd go visit them for Thanksgiving. The whole extended family would come over. We'd go out hunting, walk their property, play hide and seek in the forest with them. Robert was super nice and loved teaching the kids how to clean the ducks they'd shot. He was a pro at hiding in the trees and finding everyone in the forest. My mom says that he was the sweetest, friendliest, most normal guy. No one suspected he had a mean bone in his body. Then he got arrested for the murder of a young girl. He was convicted and serving a life sentence when he wrote to police, confessing to almost 50 more murders. My mom had told me about an encounter she had with Fred West back in the day. I can't fully remember all the details, but to sum it up, my mum, who at the time was young, was walking home from her job, which is probably like a good 15 or so minutes from her house. I know the R pretty well as it was my go-to for teenage drunken street parties, and she was just about to turn into her estate when a car pulled up beside her, and he immediately started talking to her. He was asking questions like, "How was your day?" Basic small talk things as if being introduced to someone for the first time. He then asked her for directions, which she gave him, and he then thanked her and offered to give her a ride to wherever she was going. My mum obviously declined and said that her house was just there, and he just kept insisting on give her a ride to the house. Eventually, my mum just went up to the first house on the estate, which was literally about an 11-second walk from where she was already, and just walked in the house saying thanks and bye as she did. Luckily at that time, almost everyone in the estate was somewhat connected to each other, either through their children or going to the same schools and whatnot. So the people in the house were initially a bit shocked at how a random person just walked in their house, listened to her and walked her home. She really dodged a bullet. Also, if she had accepted a ride from him, I might not even be here to tell you all about this. My mama worked with a woman who was walked to her car by the Gaffney Strangler. I was young, so I don't remember it well enough to tell you my perspective, so let me tell you my mom's serial killer story about Gary Michael Hilton. So I grew up deep in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina. We lived on a mountain, relatively isolated. There was a road going up into the woods behind our house that typically people would drive up to go hunting. Well, one day this white van goes up there. It was weird, because that's not what people typically drive to go hunting. And my mom had never seen this van before. Whatever, we brush it off. The next day, the van comes back. Now my mom has a really bad feeling about this. We go down to the bottom of our small driveway to where the road forks into the woods and wait. My mom wanted to get his plate number, and I was just a nosy kid. Well, here he comes, and my mom gets ready to get his plate number. Then he makes eye contact with her. My mom said looking into his eyes felt like looking into pure evil. She had never felt that before, and has never felt it since. She told me to run, and we hauled ass back up the drive and into our house. About a week later, the police caught and arrested him. She saw that van on the TV, and she knew for sure because it was the same van. I was a student at UVA during the Morgan Harrington murder, and though I'd graduated by the time of the Hannah Graham disappearance and murder, I had been following the case pretty closely since it seemed so similar to Harrington. After Jesse Matthew was arrested in connection with these crimes, I read a few articles on his background. I learned that he was a Charlottesville native and had attended Liberty University, the ultra-religious university founded by Jerry Falwell, on a football scholarship, but left in 2002 after sexual assault allegations. He later attended Christopher Newport University, but again left after another assault allegation. He eventually returned to Charlottesville, where he worked as a taxi driver until 2010. And this is when it hit me. Jesse Matthew had been my taxi driver in October 2008. Then a freshman at UVA, I needed a ride to the airport for a trip home during fall break. Charlottesville is not a big city, so while taxis are available, you have to call the company ahead of time and schedule to be picked up. And as scheduled, Jesse Matthew arrived in his taxi. He asked if I would like to sit in the passenger seat since it was just me. I didn't know what else to do, so I did. He was very polite, very talkative, and a little bit awkward. He asked me a number of questions on the trip to the airport, including a few about my relationship at the time. He talked about his time playing football at Liberty and the rocky patch he was going through with his girlfriend. When we got to the airport, he said he would be happy to pick me up when I returned and gave me his cell number to call. And of course, my unwitting, naive self took him up on that offer. We had a similar conversation on the trip back to UVA. As we got to campus, he insisted that he take me right to my dorm. Somewhere in the back of my trusting brain, a little red flag finally went up. I told him anywhere along the main road through campus was fine, but he wanted my dorm. Luckily, I lived in a residential college made up of a number of buildings connected by a series of basement-level tunnels. I directed him to the building that had the common room for the whole residential college. I thanked him, ran into the common room, and took the underground tunnel to my actual dorm. By the end of the experience, it all seemed a little weird, but I didn't think much of it again until 6 years later when I put it together as I read about the man arrested for multiple rapes and murders. I don't have proof that it was absolutely, without a doubt, him, but I mean, how many liberty-attending, football-playing, taxi drivers that match the description can there be in one college town? Head-to-toe goosebumps when I figured it out. The scariest thing is that I was very similar in appearance to Morgan and Hannah at the time. 18-year-old blondish student.
You've been listening to Dead Air. Like and subscribe for more. Good night.